We begin tonight with breaking news, and a lot of it. The appointments are coming pretty fast and pretty furious. Within the past hour, President-elect Trump has chosen a defense secretary and more. First, the defense secretary is Pete Hegseth. If confirmed, he'll oversee more than 2 million active duty and reserve forces, 750,000 civilian employees, and a budget of nearly $850 billion. His current job is co-host of Fox and Friends Weekend. Hegseth is a decorated Army combat veteran as well as a graduate of Princeton and Harvard. He has no prior government experience. Then, just over 20 minutes ago, another Trump announcement, this one involving former campaign rival Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk to head a new government department. Reading from his statement, I'm pleased to announce that the great Elon Musk, working in conjunction with American patriot Vivek Ramaswamy, will lead the Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. Together, these two wonderful Americans will pave the way for my administration to dismantle government bureaucracy, slash excess regulations, cut wasteful expenditures, and restructure federal agencies essential to Save America movement. This, he added, would potentially become, in his words, the Manhattan Project of our time. Now, all of this comes at the end of a day that saw new reporting in the Wall Street Journal on significant potential moves by the president-elect involving top military commanders. Now, the headline reads, Trump draft executive order would create board to purge generals. Panel could upend military review process and raise concerns about politicization of military. The Journal got a look at the draft, which calls for the creation of a board of retired senior military personnel empowered to review 3- and 4-star officers and recommend removals of any deemed unfit for leadership. Quoting from the report, as commander-in-chief, Trump can fire any officer at will, but an outside board whose members he appoints would bypass the Pentagon's regular promotion system, signaling across the military that he intends to purge a number of generals and admirals. A transition team spokeswoman did not comment on the draft order, but she did say that Americans gave him a mandate to, quote, implement the promises he made on the campaign trail, and he certainly did promise action against certain generals.
You see these generals lately on television? They are woke. You may have a few people on the top that are woke, and we're going to get rid of them so damn fast. You know, we have the real generals, and we have the fake woke generals. We're getting a little tired of the woke generals. The woke generals should be fired immediately. We will fire the woke generals.
Are you going to fire those generals? The woke generals at the top? Because people have been talking about it.
Yes, I would get rid of them.
The Journal article cites 2 defense officials as identifying Joint Chiefs Chairman C.Q. Brown Jr. as a feared potential target for the president-elect. Brown, you'll remember, spoke about the impact the Black Lives Matter protest had on him and what it was like as a black fighter pilot. Now, this comes as the president-elect names more loyalists in addition to Pete Hegseth to his administration, tapping former Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe to run the Central Intelligence Agency. He also chose South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem to be his new Secretary of Homeland Security, and also named former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee his ambassador to Israel. Huckabee is a hardline supporter of Israel who once denied the existence of Palestinians as a people.
Basically, I mean, there really is no such thing as, and I have to be careful in saying this because people will really get upset, there's really no such thing as a Palestinian. There's not.
The president-elect travels to Washington tomorrow to meet with President Biden. Also tomorrow, Republican senators, having won control of the chamber, will meet to decide what's been a hotly contested race to become the next majority leader. Once again, tonight, things are moving fast. The source's Caitlin Collins is near Mar-a-Lago. So let's talk about first Pete Hegseth to run the Pentagon. How big of a surprise is that?
It's a bit of a surprise in the sense that things are moving so quickly in terms of how these picks are happening. Now, Pete Hegseth is someone who has long been on Trump's radar. He's a he's an Iraq War veteran. He's got 2 Bronze Stars, Anderson, but he is much better known to certainly the president-elect from his stint as a Fox News host. He co-hosts the program on the weekends. I remember when Trump was in office the first time, he debated with making Hegseth the head of the Department of Veterans Affairs, though there were questions at the time over whether or not he could get confirmed. He doesn't have any government experience. And so that is something that is certainly going to be a reaction that we're seeing on Capitol Hill tonight, even some lawmakers not knowing who Pete Hegseth is. So I think that's a big question tonight over what that confirmation process is going to look like, because obviously he has been tapped to now lead what is the government's biggest federal agency, as you just noted there, with a massive budget and millions of employees at the Department of Defense. But Trump has made his choice in Pete Hegseth, similar to others that we have seen ardent defenders of his on Fox News. He was just in that clip that you were playing there where they were questioning him about the woke generals. That was Pete Hegseth, who was sitting the closest to the camera. And so I've been talking to people. I had heard his name a few hours ago from one source. I had checked in with some others who said, you know, that can't be real. That's not right. I had not heard that even 24 hours ago. So that could give you some insight into just how quickly this came together, Anderson, which may not be, you know, entirely surprising given how this whole process has gone.
And I mean, you've been talking about Elon Musk and how he's been down there for quite a while now since the election. What more are you learning about Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy leading this Department of Government Efficiency?
Yeah, this is not a surprise because this is something that Elon Musk had been talking about when he was out on the campaign trail for Donald Trump in Pennsylvania over the last few weeks. I was at the Madison Square Garden rally where he talked about it as well. And what they're calling it is the Department of Government Efficiency. Obviously, any federal agency that was created would have to be approved by Congress. That's not a sense that that's happening here, that this is necessarily a real, genuine agency. But clearly what they have been seeking to do is to cut costs and federal spending and also staffing inside the federal government. Now, I think there are real questions tonight about what that's going to look like. This says it's being led by Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy. One, Anderson, question that I have had over the last few weeks is, you know, we've heard them talk about $1 trillion in cuts, but when you look at how much money the federal government spent in the last fiscal year, it's close to $7 million. And over $7 trillion, over $5 trillion of that has gone to healthcare, to Social Security, to veterans. So if they're cutting $1 trillion, they wouldn't really be able to do that without dipping into that. So I think there is a real question of how all this would work, because obviously spending for agencies is approved by Congress and the president, not by outside groups. And we have been told Elon Musk is not joining the federal government per se. So I still think there's a lot of questions over what exactly this is going to look like. But Elon Musk clearly has had a lot of influence on this transition, as he has been spending a lot of time at Mar-a-Lago with Trump.
I mean, it's interesting they're calling it the Department of Government Efficiency as if it's like the Department of Defense or the Department of Education or Department of the Interior. It's not going to be like a department like that. It's going to be these two guys and whomever else. I mean, they're not going to go through any confirmation process, are they?
No, there's nothing to be. There's no confirmation because there's nothing to be nominated to. It's not obviously an actual government agency. And I'll leave it to others to talk about the irony of creating a government agency per se, as they are doing here, to cut down on, you know, government staffing and spending, which is the goal here. But I think this is an effort that also should speak to the amount of influence that outside players are going to have on what this second Trump term looks like when it comes to Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy in this sense. I mean, this has long been something he's sought to do. Trump pledged to cut federal spending when he was in office the last time. Obviously, that didn't happen. The deficit actually went up. So this is certainly one of those wait and see what it actually looks like, Anderson, and how it plays out.
And Governor Kristi Noem was just confirmed as President-elect Trump's pick for Department of Homeland Security Secretary. I mean, that's a huge department. I mean, that seems surprising.
Well, so I just want to tell you about this because we published this story about 1 a.m. last night. I had heard that she had been picked, that Trump had called her and told her she was his pick to lead the Department of Homeland Security. Most people think of that and they think immigration. Obviously, that's what we've been talking about so much. But the DHS is a huge agency that oversees also FEMA, the Coast Guard, Secret Service, cybersecurity. I mean, it is a very sprawling agency, obviously has hundreds of thousands of employees, a huge budget as well. And so some people that I spoke to, even in Trump's orbit, were shocked that that was actually the name that he had gone with. And there was actually a lot of internal uproar today. It wasn't clear that the statement that Trump just put out confirming she was his pick was going to happen. I learned a little while ago that he was sticking by her and that she was going to be his selection. But Anderson, you know, we talk about the confirmation process here because Trump has 53 Republican senators. It doesn't seem like it'll be all that difficult. But I think there are questions for people like Pete Hegseth and Kristi Noem in these massive agencies. What kind of questions even Republican senators are going to have for them and their qualifications and their views of such huge posts in the federal government.
President-elect Donald Trump's administration is coming into focus as the president builds out his cabinet. announcing Tuesday that former Arkansas governor and Trump loyalist Mike Huckabee would serve as ambassador to Israel, as Huckabee has been a staunch supporter of Israel's and could strengthen ties between the country and evangelical Americans. CNN also learning that Trump is expected to select Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. The two men, once rivals, facing off in an ugly and personal primary for president in 2016.
Have you seen his hands? They're like this. And you know what they say about men with small hands?
So when little Marco spews his crap about the size of my hands, which are big,
before Rubio transitioned into one of Trump's staunchest allies.
I think they love you a lot.
And was considered a top contender to be his vice president.
That is the choice in this election between a president, Donald J. Trump, who gave us the most secure border in modern history. We had an economy where prices were stable, salaries were going up, and people could afford to have a little bit of money left over at the end of the month.
Rubio, the most hawkish of his choices, is known for his tough stance on China. Trump has placed loyalists in 3 other key positions. The president-elect posting on Truth Social today that he has tapped Florida Congressman Mike Waltz as national security advisor. A former Green Beret, Waltz was often by Trump's side on the campaign trail. Trump also choosing South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem as head of the Department of Homeland Security. Noem also once thought of as a potential pick for VP.
We already knew that President Donald Trump was a fighter,
but faced political backlash after revealing in her memoir that she shot her 14-month-old dog and falsely claiming she had met with North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un. Each of these roles, aside from Waltz, must be confirmed by the Senate. However, Trump is expected to create roles that hold an enormous amount of power that don't need to go through the same approval. Already evident in his recent choices to help implement Trump's ambitious immigration policy proposals, including mass deportations.
What do these new picks tell you about a second Trump administration?
Well, clearly Donald Trump is focused on foreign policy. I mean, the fact that these were some of the top picks, Secretary of State, as you said, National Security Advisor, that signals exactly what direction that Donald Trump wants to go in. And the particular interest here is Mike Waltz, who is a Republican from Florida. He is somebody who is a strong China hawk. He has spoken out against China. Marco Rubio, who is now, we believe, going to be offered Secretary of State if everything holds. Again,
right.
You know, with Donald Trump, nothing's official until it's official. Also a big China hawk. This is going to give an indication of the direction that Donald Trump wants to go in, particularly when it comes to one of his campaign promises, which was being incredibly hard on China. Now, the one interesting thing about Marco Rubio, and really Mike Waltz to some extension, Waltz has seen a more kind of adaptive approach to Donald Trump. He's gone a little bit further with him, but Marco Rubio himself is not known as an isolationist, America First policy. He is much more of a globalist in terms of who was up for Secretary of State. So how that plays out in Donald Trump's America and Donald Trump's administration is something that we still have questions about.
What about this afternoon's announcement, which is an official announcement, unlike the Rubio one, which we think is coming but hasn't yet, the official announcement of the new U.S. ambassador, or at least nominee to be U.S. ambassador to Israel?
I think that sends a very strong message to Netanyahu, which Donald Trump has been really trying to build up that relationship. He's been very pleased with the reach out that we've had, that he has seen from Netanyahu to him directly. He went down to Mar-a-Lago. He has called him on multiple occasions. And obviously, as we know, with the former president, flattery gets you very far. And we have been told by senior advisors that Netanyahu has been very complimentary of former President Donald Trump. And the signal with Huckabee is this is somebody who has been a staunch supporter of Israel. He is somebody who, while not Jewish, could strengthen ties between Netanyahu and evangelical Christians in America, something that Netanyahu has wanted to do. But Mike Huckabee has really taken a line even further than so many people that we've seen. He has at one point refused to acknowledge the even existence of the West Bank. So these are messages.
And he called it Judea and Samaria.
Yes, and said that it doesn't exist in his mind or something along those lines. Clearly, this is sending a strong signal to Netanyahu and to Israel that this is going to be a top priority of his.
All right, Kristen Holmes, thanks so much. Joining us now, former U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations and National Security Advisor for Donald Trump, John Bolton. Mr. Ambassador, good to see you. So the Wall Street Journal is reporting of a draft executive order that's been presented to the Trump transition team that would establish a, quote, warrior board of retired senior military personnel who would have the power to review 3- and 4-star generals and admirals and to recommend removals of any of them deemed unfit for leadership. The Trump transition team, when we asked them about this Wall Street Journal report, responded to CNN's request for comment on this by saying, quote, "The American people reelected President Trump by a resounding margin, giving him a mandate to implement the promises he made on the campaign trail. He will deliver," unquote. What's your take on this?
Well, I haven't seen the text of the supposed order, but I would say that one of America's most important achievements in governance is really to have made the military totally non-political in our history. It wasn't always that way. There were fits and starts, but we really have reached a point where the military believes its oath is to the Constitution and not to the holder of the presidency. And I understand there are concerns about things the Biden administration did in the woke area in the military, and there's a way to solve that particular problem, and that's to sit the generals down and say, there's a new sheriff in town, we're not doing that woke stuff anymore. I think they would say, yes, sir, and that would be the end of it. But this idea that you're now going to review the generals with some indication there's a political loyalty test, I think is not just a mistake for the incoming Trump administration. This risks very significantly wrecking our success in keeping the military non-political.
I asked when I interviewed then Senator, now Vice President-elect J.D. Vance about all the people like yourself and John Kelly and General Milley and all the others who have been critical of him. This is before the election. I asked about that. I want to play some of that and get your reaction.
For a lot of former members of the Pentagon bureaucracy, a lot of old neoconservatives, they have a fundamental difference with Donald Trump on the question of peace and war. They don't like that Donald Trump said no when a lot of them wanted to start a ridiculous war.
On Sunday, as Mr. Trump, President-elect Trump is forming his cabinet, Donald Trump Jr. reposted a tweet that said, quote, "We need maximum pressure to keep all neocons and war hawks out of the Trump administration," unquote, to which Don Jr. replied, "Agreed, I'm on it." It sounds like Don Jr. and J.D. Vance, well, I know J.D. Vance was talking about people like you. It sounds like that Don Jr. might also be. I'm wondering how you view what they are saying with some of the picks we've heard.
Well, I think let's start with the remark by J.D. Vance. It really shows a superficiality in his understanding of how the government runs. The complaints that I had, I won't get others roped into it, were that the way Trump behaved in office showed he was not fit for office. It had nothing to do with his substantive decisions. It was, among other things, his unwillingness to take responsibility for the very decisions he had made. But I do think there's a group of people who think that they are going to be able to screen out people not on the basis of philosophy so much as on their attitude toward the president. And the word loyalty is often used. I think that's the wrong word, actually. I think what Trump wants from his advisors is fealty, really a feudal sense of subservience. You know, he may get that, but I will tell you that that will not serve him well over the course of his next term, and it certainly won't serve the country well.
As a former national security advisor, you tweeted that you, quote, "implored the next office holder to do everything he or she can to put factual information in front of the president," unquote. I'm wondering if you think Florida Congressman Mike Waltz, whose name has been floated as a national security advisor, and Senator Marco Rubio, whose name has been floated as a Secretary of State, do you think that they will do that, provide the president with factual information?
Based on my knowledge of them, I think they will try and do it. The question is whether Trump's willing to receive it. You know, what I described as the role of National Security Advisor is the classic Brent Scowcroft formulation. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump. It was well before Trump came on the scene. But that's what the role is. And really, it's incumbent on the senior cabinet members and others who advise the president to try and do the same thing.
Rubio, back in 2017, asked some tough questions of Trump's first Secretary of State pick, Rex Tillerson, specifically on the issue of Russia. Rubio pressed Tillerson on whether Tillerson thought that Putin was a war criminal, and he said this.
Mr. Tillerson, you've engaged in significant business activities in Russia, so I'm sure you're aware that very few things of a major proportion happen in that country without Vladimir Putin's permission.
Now I want to play what Senator Rubio said about Russia's war on Ukraine just last week.
I think the Ukrainians have been incredibly brave and strong in standing up to Russia. But at the end of the day, what we are funding here is a stalemate war, and it needs to be brought to a conclusion because that country is going to be set back 100 years. Now, that doesn't mean that we celebrate what Vladimir Putin did or are excited about it, but I think there has to also be some common sense here.
What do you think?
Well, I'll let Marco answer for that. Look, I think it's important that anybody who takes a senior position of responsibility in the Trump administration try and hold on to their principles and their integrity. I saw during my time people that I thought had a lot of intellectual integrity and personal integrity just wrap themselves around the axle in order to stay in the Trump administration. I think that's a mistake. I think one of the most important things somebody coming into an important job like that should remember is they don't need the job, and it's not more important than their integrity and honesty.
Former Ambassador John Bolton, thank you, sir. Good to see you. Appreciate it.
Our political commentators are back as we cover the breaking news on the Trump transition, including the choice of former Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe to become the next CIA chief. Alyssa, let me start this block with you. From Ratcliffe for CIA Director to Rubio for Secretary of State, how do you assess so far Trump's foreign policy team now that it's clearly shaping up?
Listen, we're still waiting on SecDef, but I think that sound you hear is America's allies giving a deep sigh of relief. I think there were fears that there could be a very isolationist second term of Donald Trump's presidency, and this team does not seem to suggest that. Marco Rubio is extremely hawkish on China. He's tough on Iran. He's taken firm positions against Russia. Mike Waltz is national security advisor. I would say the same about, obviously, a Green Beret who served in combat. And John Ratcliffe is somebody who served as director of the Office of National Intelligence in the former term, was a United States congressman. These are people with the credentials to do the jobs. They signal that he's putting serious people into these roles, not purely sycophants who are there more out of loyalty than credentials. These are, of course, loyalists, but they also have the credentials to be there. So I think this is shaping up to be a serious cabinet that I think Donald Trump should really be focused on the many things facing the world right now and facing our country domestically, not retaliation against four-star generals.
Scott Jennings, what stands out to you from this slate of picks so far? How does this contrast, you believe, with Trump's last transition back in 2016?
Well, I think this time around, he knows exactly what he's looking for. Last time, he hadn't been in politics, and I think maybe he ended up picking people that he just didn't mesh with very well. Truthfully, I think this group of people, A, they support his agenda, B, they're highly competent and highly experienced, and C, they've all proven themselves in Washington, D.C. or in other levels of government. So I love the experience, I love the competence, and I love the fact that Trump is moving on this decisively. If there's one thing the government is supposed to be doing, it's national security, defending America, and going ahead and signaling to the world that I am going to put together a competent, experienced team of people to handle our national security. That's got to make our allies feel good, and it ought to put the rest of the world on notice over in Iran or China or anywhere else. We've got a serious group of people who aren't going to put up with any crap from you guys, so buckle up in January.
And Jamal Simmons is with us as well. Jamal, Trump's choice for ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, once said, and I'm quoting him now, there's really no such thing as a Palestinian. As Trump leans on fiercely pro-Israel voices, at least so far, what does that bode for his second term? What do you think?
It doesn't bode well. I mean, what we're seeing right now happening in the Middle East is it's really a cauldron, and it's a tinderbox, and we're seeing more and more flares of fighting that are breaking out that are, hurting not just people in the Middle East, but also there have been Americans from time to time being caught in this. I think about the last couple of ambassadors, whether it was Jack Lew, who was former White House Chief of Staff and Treasury Secretary, or Tom Nides, who was former Deputy Secretary of State. These were very serious people who understood international foreign policy. They understood some of the major issues that were taking place. They tried to have an even hand when they were dealing, because America leads not just with our force. We also lead with kind of this moral suasion. We lead with hard power. We also have soft power of our economy. And we think about those big soft power presidents like Bill Clinton or Barack Obama, and then hard power presidents like George Bush. This is kind of a puzzling power. right? We just don't know what Donald Trump is up to. We don't know what his real objectives are. And is he just going to try to govern by business deals, by figuring out how to cut this up like some sort of a land deal? Or is he going to try to actually get to some level of justice where the people in Israel feel like they're secure and the people in Gaza and the West Bank feel like they have a future and they're secure and they've got some self-determination? That's what America's best role is. And it doesn't feel like we're going to have that kind of an even hand.
Can I just comment on that, Wolf? I'm sorry. That first of all, Israel is America's ally, and it is vital that we have an ambassador to Israel who believes in the special relationship between the United States and Israel. He's done that with Governor Huckabee. That's number one. Number two, at the end of Donald Trump's first term, he implemented the Abraham Accords, and largely the Middle East was on a good path. Alyssa was there. She knows about it. She helped communicate about it, and that's an unequivocal fact about what he accomplished when he was the president. Donald Trump ran on a platform of trying to settle down the world and specifically settle down the Middle East. And he has a track record of doing it, and he has a track record of supporting our ally Israel. And so for all the Republicans and all the conservatives and all the people who want a calmer world out there, I think Huckabee's a good choice. The National Security Team's a good choice. But we have to stand with Israel. This idea that picking Mike Huckabee, who supports Israel, is somehow bad, to me, is crazy. It's a great choice.
All of Trump's national security, foreign policy choices so far are extremely pro-Israel indeed. And Alyssa, let me get your reaction to another serious choice that was announced today. Were you surprised to hear Trump is now expected to nominate Kristi Noem for Homeland Security Secretary after her controversies this summer over supposedly killing her dog and falsely claiming she met the North Korean leader Kim Jong-un?
This was one of the ones that perplexed me, but to be honest, I think that Tom Homan, who's going to oversee a lot of border security and also immigration within the country, who's an alumni of the Obama administration and the first Trump administration, is going to be the border czar who's overseeing this. I'd honestly argue that Trump is kind of layering Kristi Noem. Being a DHS secretary in a Trump administration has traditionally been a no-win job. I think somebody who's a lot more of a tactician, like Tom Homan, is somebody who is probably going to be more effective for what he's trying to do. And I would just remind folks, in the Obama administration, nearly 3 million people deported under Tom Homan overseeing that. And then again, Trump actually had lower numbers of deportation in the first term. So as he's talking about these mass deportations he's going to do, I would imagine that this is the individual who's going to be running them. I don't necessarily know what the appeal of Kristi Noem in this role is, but I would guess that the border czar is the person who will be overseeing that.
President-elect Trump choosing Mike Huckabee for the job of U.S. ambassador to Israel. Now, this is a decision that would have huge ramifications. And we have a very different view on policy, what Huckabee's put forward, than any other ambassadors so publicly who have served in that role. K-File tonight is revealing that Huckabee said, quote, "There's really no such thing as a Palestinian, never mind a state." Huckabee making extensive comments on this topic when he was running for president in 2008. And Andrew Kaczynski of K-File joins me now. In the context of the war and the fears that it could become a much, much bigger war, this reporting is so crucial. What more do you know about what Mike Huckabee has said?
Right, and this nomination of Mike Huckabee as ambassador to Israel, this is a extremely hawkish pick by President-elect Trump. He has a track record of highly polarizing comments on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. These views go back years, with him repeatedly questioning the legitimacy of a Palestinian state on the border with Israel. He has said that if a Palestinian state were to be created, it should be not created where it is now. It should be created with land from the neighboring countries, Syria, Jordan, Egypt. He even described a Palestinian identity in one of the clips he found as, quote, a political tool to try and force land away from Israel. Now, I first obtained these comments we're about to hear when he ran for president in 2016. Just take a listen to them right now.
Basically, I mean, there really is no such thing as, and I have to be careful in saying this because people will really get upset, there's really no such thing as a Palestinian. There's not. Arabs and Persians, you don't have, you know, and there's such complexity within that. There's really no such thing. That's been a political tool to try to force land away from Israel.
I mean, just obviously hugely significant. You're talking about he would, if anything, take land from neighboring countries. Obviously, the clear implications there would be for Israel to annex the West Bank, which is obviously seismic, if true. Andrew, obviously, this isn't the only time Huckabee has talked about this issue. I mean, this is an issue that he feels is deeply personal.
That's right. That's right. He takes trips to Israel. This goes back all the way, I mean, to 2008, where we played that initial clip from. But this is a position that he has consistently had. It is far from the only time that he has said it. He has said consistently that he opposes a two-state solution. He has said, quote, "There's plenty of land outside Israel and the rest of the world for a Palestinian state." Take a listen to him going a little bit further on that in 2015.
The two-state solution, if we mean two governments holding the same piece of real estate, is irrational and unworkable. If there is a two-state solution, the Palestinian state needs to be outside the boundaries of the nation of Israel. There's plenty of land in the world that we could find a place and say, okay, let's create a Palestinian state.
So we did reach out to Huckabee personally. We reached out to the Trump transition, and we asked them if he stood by those comments. We didn't hear back from either of them, so it's going to be interesting to see how all of this plays out, especially with the conflict that's going on right now in Gaza.
Certainly, and raises questions of the voters and the voters who had voted for Jill Stein as an opposition to Kamala Harris, so they may feel about what.
And some of them even voted for Trump as well.
And some of them even voted for Trump, and this is well, this is what you would have thought Trump is consistent with the words that they've put out before. All right, Andrew, thank you very much.